Hello and welcome to the Purple Podcast. My name is Will Roars and I'm here with...
My name is Jacob Katz.
And today we're going to discuss political violence and gun laws in our country.
Jacob, why did you decide to be a guest on this podcast?
I decided to be a guest on this podcast. I first heard about it from my friend. He recommended that I participate in it. I took a look at the form to sign up, and I thought, it's really a good idea. I like it. I think that especially in today's political climate, it's increasingly more important that we be able to sit down and have civil discourse to get to real conclusions rather than simply shouting at each other. I feel like that's not particularly productive for democracy.
Do we need stricter gun laws in the U.S.? Why or why not?
I think that with regard to gun laws, I think we need to have not so much more strict gun laws with regard to how people can get guns or who can get guns, but I guess more of who can get guns, but more so a conceded effort into mental health with respect to guns. I think that mental health is certainly a huge problem nowadays, especially amongst this generation, but today's Americans are more anxious, depressed, and exhibiting other signs of mental illness than any other generation in American history, and I think that certainly plays a role in gun violence as a whole. I know in the last 20 years we've seen a huge uptick in violent episodes with guns, particularly among youth, and I think that's really a problem that needs to be addressed. And it would also, I feel like most people would agree with that kind of legislation rather than legislation that many might view as impeding their Second Amendment rights.
So what measures should be taken to address mental health issues in relation to gun ownership?
I know as of present there is a substantial background check system, but I feel like more efforts should be taken with respect to ascertaining what the mental stability or possible episodes of psychosis or past episodes of psychosis in somebody looking to buy a gun. Ultimately, I do believe it is within our Second Amendment rights to be able to keep and bear arms. However, I do think that in Mr. Peck's ethics class, we've talked about this. In the context of a lot of amendments, there exists a sort of precedent in terms of a prevailing state interest or fear for public safety that would sort of hamper the unlimited expression of one's rights. For example, Schneck v. U.S. for the First Amendment. And I think that the same sort of logic could be applied to the Second Amendment in that somebody who poses a danger to the public, i.e. somebody suffering from severe mental illness that would otherwise impair their judgment, might need to be more restrained in their ability to buy a gun than someone of good mental health.
Yeah, I agree. I think mental health is really important, and I think we can all agree that we need more, legislation on that. But in terms of, I think stricter gun laws in one way, if we had stricter gun laws around how you keep your arms, then that would restrict people with bad mental health from getting them in, from accessing them in the first place, right? You kind of brought up youth, and youth usually get those guns from their parents.
Yeah, of course.
So if there was ways of having stricter gun laws of how you can keep arms, then that would restrict those, kids and other people with bad mental health from getting access to those guns to use them in
of course. And if you don't mind me asking, what exactly would you envision as some sort of legislation along those lines?
Something some sort of you have to keep them in a safe, and you have to whatever. I don't know the specifics of the logistics of what you can and can't do, but some sort of stricter thing that way.
I feel like especially within the context of how the Constitution treats amendments like that, generally that would fall under the discretion of the individual owner, and it wouldn't really be the authority. How exactly would you propose that they enforce that? Would they check people's homes to ensure that the guns are kept in safes? I understand the sentiment that you're trying to get at. I certainly agree that ultimately it does fall upon the gun owner to properly maintain and take care of their gun, as well as to properly keep it safe and ensure that it's not being misused or in a place in which it could be stolen or misused. But I feel like ultimately that burden falls onto the shoulders of the person who buys the gun, rather than some sort of law or legal action which the state would be required to enforce. I feel like that certainly seems just a little not really logical in terms of how exactly they would go about enforcing that. But
that's true. And I don't know the system that would be put in place, but looking at the recent sort of semi-recent political violence, like Charlie Kirk's death, that gun was, I'm pretty sure, was it illegal? It was a legal gun that you could get. I think it was, but it was should not, you know, it was like a huge assault rifle or something, you know, and like I think there needs to be limits on what guns you can get, and I believe that there's only really two reasons why you should have arms in the first place. One is self-defense, right?
Yeah,
you can keep one in your house in case someone breaks in, like you know, self-defense. The second is hunting, right?
Yeah.
I think people should, you know, have the right to hunt. Like I'm not going to stop them from hunting, but I think there needs to be limits. Like there needs to be like specific types of guns that you can use for each one, and then the rest need to be limited. You know.
Yeah, I think absent some legislation on, and I think just in the 250 years of the United States, we have an existing precedent such that the Second Amendment needing requiring the strong militia, the citizens of the United States retain the right to keep and bear arms, yada yada yada, whatever, as the founding fathers put. In 250 years of American precedent, we have had the right to keep and bear arms as we see fit, and as the technology of the gun industry has evolved in those 250 years, we certainly have encountered issues like, what are we supposed to do with fully automatic weapons? What are we supposed to do with large caliber rifles and semi-automatic rifles? And I feel like, and we have taken pretty strong action in the past, particularly in the 1930s, after Bonnie and Clyde went on their rampage with a cut-down BAR machine gun from surplus of World War I, the federal government enacted fully automatic weapons bans. Now you need a Class 3 firearms license along with thousands of dollars worth of paperwork in order to even legally have a fully automatic rifle, which in and of itself is extremely restricted, as well as suppressors and stuff like that. I feel like it might be difficult in today's political climate in order to restrict even further than that. I know Virginia is enacting, under the new administration, new restrictions on quote-unquote assault weapons. I just feel like it's not particularly clear in terms of how they're describing what an assault weapon is. And an assault rifle is really a very broad term, because assault is not particularly accurate. Ultimately, it's not the gun that is... The gun is styled to be ergonomic and capable of being fired and being well maintained in a number of environments, and is created in a style that many view to be as a AR style. However, I don't think ultimately what the gun is used for falls upon the discretion of the person who's using the gun rather than the gun itself. I feel like some guns aren't necessarily designed in a way in which that would promote dramatic violence in their introduction to the market. However, I do think, to your point, certain restriction absolutely needs to be taken on things like switches, which have hit the streets en masse, artificial conversions that are modifying stock guns, the erasure of serial numbers, things like those certainly need to be cracked down on.
Yeah, I mean, part of me is like, what do you need all these, like, you know, big guns for? Like, for self-defense, you only need, like, a pistol, right? Like, or whatever. Like, I feel like there's, people are trying to buy such, like, monumental guns for what? Like, you know, like, what do you...
Yeah.
For show? Like, that's not...
Yeah, I think while a critique may be valid in that respect, I think ultimately it's not the government's job to tell us what we can and cannot buy. I think it is within our right to keep and bear arms as elucidated by the Constitution. And I think while some may have their opinions about whether or not such large guns or high-capacity rifles or large-caliber rifles are necessary as compared to smaller, more withdrawn guns, I don't think it's within the government's right nor its job to enforce or propose any sort of legislation that would prevent the American people from engaging in commerce as they see fit.
I disagree. I think the government has a right to enforce that when the items that are being bought could put another person's life in danger.
Yeah.
I think if there's always, I think the government should definitely have a say in enforcing what people can buy if that thing could put someone's life in danger, you know?
Yeah.
Like, same for, yeah.
Okay.
With stricter gun laws, could the deaths of Charlie Kirk and other political figures have been prevented? Why or why not?
I think that's to the point of the mental health epidemic idea. I think that people who engage in political violence like that often are distraught with the political and economic climate of the United States, which, well, yes, one could make the argument that it's suboptimal, or one might propose that. However, I do think that the ability for people exhibiting dangerous sentiments or having dangerous lapses in mental health, or things like that. I feel like that is certainly an issue upon which we need to investigate more in those prospective gun buyers and ensure that those who have access to guns don't pose an immediate risk to public safety and the greater safety of the American people.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think I think that's totally valid. I think part of it's like, if you take, in that sense, in that specific circumstance, with Charlie Kirk, the person who shot him was probably not mentally healthy.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Right, but like, but then there's also been so many instances of like school shootings, and while those kids might not necessarily be mentally healthy, they might think of it in a different way. It's like, oh, this is kind of like, they might not totally understand like what it is yet, or what, and I think that kind of goes back to the original point of like, they should not be in the perimeter of places where they could of these guns, or places where they, like, I think there needs to be some sort of rules about how guns can be kept, but also like what guns you're allowed to have if you have children, or what guns you're allowed to do, whatever. Like, maybe guns are only, maybe hunting guns specifically, which they're like probably bigger, are only kept at these hunting facilities, or maybe, like, I feel like there needs to be like some.
I think, given the precedent and the climate of the United States at present, as well as the personal beliefs of many citizens, I feel like that legislation probably wouldn't go through. As much as I appreciate the sentiment that you're raising in there,
I probably wouldn't.
I don't think that. I don't think many people would even agree with that, and at least in terms of the current Senate and House and people who actually do pass laws. While something like that may be proposed, and I do appreciate the sentiment upon which it's trying to build the safety, I do think that a restriction upon the right to purchase certain firearms, and while yes, there is precedent to your point, such as the restriction of fully automatic rifles, I think it would be difficult to define what exactly a hunting gun is.
Right.
And I think that defining all these terms, as well as establishing a constitutional means by which the government might go about restricting these purchases beyond which they already are, might prove to be more trouble than it's worth, as well as potentially raising a Supreme Court case in terms of its constitutionality concerning the Second Amendment.
Is the USA spending too much money on military?
Yes.
I would say that the United States budget, I would agree, yeah. As objectively, $1 trillion a year is a lot to spend on the military. I do believe it is certainly important that we do spend a significant sum of money on the military, so as to dissuade foreign terror, internet rogue states, stuff like that, just dangers not only to American citizens, but to citizens of the world, really. But I do believe that we do spend some amount of excess on not only our military, but also international military organizations spending. I know the United States comprises more than 50% of total NATO spending of all member states. I feel like it would behoove the United States, as well as other nations, for us to maybe withdraw back some of our funding from things like that, and for other nations to really take care of their fraction of the bill. Particularly, I know Poland has put their foot through the door in that respect. I think they've promised a 5% GDP increase to military spending concerning NATO and their own defense in light of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I think that's to a good end. I certainly agree with that. But I agree that the United States does spend a little, maybe a bit excessive amounts of money on its own military, whereas we have more, as I view, some more pressing matters such as domestic affairs, my own personal belief, but I'd like to see a bit more money go to NASA. Things like programs to better the lives of the American people, I feel like, are certainly the prerogative of the government is to, as the Founding Fathers first set out in their own writings, a good government is that which has a relatively hands-off approach to the people, but has a gentle guiding hand with which it can maintain the stability and livelihood of the American people and their collective well-being. And I do think that it would behoove the United States government, in order to reallocate some amount of defense spending to the betterment of the American people.
I agree. I mean, I think we definitely spend too much on the military. We could take so much out and spend it on science, and spend it on healthcare, and spend it on the environment. Whatever. And I think, like, as a citizen of the United States, like, us having by far the #1 military does that make me feel safe? Yes, I guess so. But like, it doesn't like. What would do more for me is if I knew that we were working to cure cancer, if we were working to help climate change, like other things that Trump is actively taking away funding from, right? Or like the endowment of the arts, right? Like there's stuff that we could be doing that could really improve citizens' lives. And for me, at least, the military isn't really improving my life, right? We just like, it just doesn't. A lot of it to me feels like that we just want to be number one, and that might not be the best thing. Like, yes, it's great to be number one, and I'm not saying we should cut back so much that we're like 50 or whatever, but like we definitely we're at this place where it feels like it's so much just like it's just so unnecessary, and we could do other things. We could improve everyday citizens' lives in a different way than we are right now.
Yeah, I think one's well within their rights to have that opinions. That state of mind. I think that it is certainly important that we maintain an aggressive stance on the defense of our nation, the defense of multinational organizations such as NATO.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly, take for example the situation in Iran and Yemen right now. The closure of the Straits of Hormuz affect not only the United States, it affects international oil shipping. It's raising gas prices all over the world. While some may argue that it's not necessarily our responsibility to handle those sorts of threats, somebody has to. And as of yet, we are the most equipped to do so.
But we went into that war, and that's when gas went up for us. Or that's when oil, at least. Like, we went into that war, and our economy got significantly worse, right? Like,
Yeah.
if we stay, like, that's that argument, like, yeah, if we never went into that war in the first place, our economy would be so much better right now.
One could make that point. However, had we not intervened, the plights of the Yemeni people would have continued. The Houthi rebels in Yemen have massacred tens of thousands of innocent civilians there. We intervened. We in association with the Saudi Arabians and the Israelis, conducted a series of air campaigns there, and took out a lot of enemy emplacements in which they were not only committing crimes against humanity, really, against the people of Yemen, but also due to the positioning of Yemen in the, I can't remember the name of the strait. It's not the Straits of Hormuz. Whatever strait is created by the Arabian Peninsula and the end of Yemen and the Horn of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
They were blocking international access to the Suez Canal right there, which proved to be a multinational issue. Somebody had to handle it.
Yeah, but are we not the ones right now bombing innocent people in Tehran, right? Like, aren't we also? Yes, we're trying to take out this regime, but and like, yes, the Yemen situation is awful, but like, we're also killing people.
No side is not culpable of anything. In war, there is no the lines of absolute morality and absolute destitution in terms of the morals of one side, it's blurry. Ultimately, what the United States has carried out in terms of its foreign military action serves to unseat a regime that within a month killed 30,000 people and nobody said a word. I personally followed the story on the innocents in Iran, and there was a profound lack of international coverage of what exactly was happening there, while much was focused on other geopolitical events. And ultimately, that regime has been a state financier of international terror for decades. They have sponsored Hamas, they have sponsored Hezbollah, they have sponsored ISIS, they've sponsored Boko Haram, they've sponsored many terrorist organizations that have killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people all over the world. They conducted a series of bombings in Europe, in the United States, throughout the Middle East. The Boston Marathon bombing, the bombing at the Paris train station in 2015. All of these were conducted by the bombing in the 1980s of the Marine barracks in Lebanon. That was conducted by Hezbollah, which was financed by Iran. All of these international terror events have been financed by a terror state, the state of Iran,
Mm-hmm.
run by a theocratic dictator who has absolutely no regard for the safety nor humanity of his own people. It ultimately, though some may disagree with whether or not it's our response, whether or not the legality of our intervention is all right, ultimately we do hold a vested interest in the betterment of mankind. As it falls upon not us as Americans, but us as humans to recognize the plights of other people and to be able to interact and take decisive action to prevent undue suffering. And I believe the founding fathers would have agreed with that. I think Thomas Jefferson, in his disagreements with the Barbary pirates, Theodore Roosevelt in his disagreement with the Spanish during the Spanish-American War, there is precedent for the United States taking decisive and powerful action. World War II, independent of us being attacked in Pearl Harbor.
Right. I mean, I agree. Like, it's awful, of course, but I think that, like, we as American people need to have a say in whether we do that or not, right? We as American people need to have a say on whether we go to war, which we didn't, right? We elected people to Congress. That's our say, is we elect representatives to go to Congress. Did Trump confide with Congress about this war? No, right? Like we need to...
The United States has not formally declared war since World War II.
Right, but it is war. It is war.
While it may be colloquially referred to as a war, it is a temporary military action which requires the renewing of funds and troops to be allocated to it under the passage of the 1973 War Powers Act under the Nixon administration. That technically is legal. Disagree with it or not, it is the current state of American legal precedent and legislation. Whether or not that needs to be revised stands to be further ascertained.
To me, this sounds like a loophole. Like we are bombing another country. To me, that is considered war, and I think that we as American people need to have a voice. We as American people need to have a voice on whether our country attacks any other country in this world, right? Whether we kill any other people in this world, we need to have a say on if that happens or not. And with this war, we did not have a say, you know? And Trump went into it not because he wanted to necessarily save these people. He wanted to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons. That was his main reason for going into this war, right? Not because of the
pretty justified reason.
Yes, no, 100%. It's a justified reason, but we didn't even know they had nuclear weapons. We didn't know for certain they did.
6 months before...
We said maybe. We said they might have been...
6 months before we intervened in Iran, us, alongside predominantly the Israelis, conducted a series of fast air campaigns within Iran, within their airspace, and destroyed a nuclear uranium enrichment facility in which they were 2-3 weeks away from having 95% enriched uranium-235, which is weapons-grade uranium that they could use to create a thermonuclear warhead, which they would then use to commit untold nuclear genocide against the powers at be. Iranian ballistic missile capability is known to be pretty good amongst the other world nations. Their estimates at Iranian ballistic missile range spans from 3,000 to 5,000 kilometers from mainland Iran, which is well within striking distance of major European nations, major African nations, Central Asia, India, any number of various nations. Iran could theoretically strike with a nuclear attack, particularly Israel. Right there, Iran has launched numerous ballistic missiles at the state of Israel, a longtime U.S. ally. And fundamentally, I believe it is not only for the defense of American treaties and agreements with other nations that we collaborate with and are allied with, but preventing nuclear war. I personally believe is a fundamental prerogative upon which we find it absolutely necessary to act beyond the shadow of a doubt. We must stop terror at such a scale from occurring.
Yeah, I mean, yes, but they didn't have a nuclear warhead yet, right? They didn't have all of that stuff. And at the end of the day, what we have gotten from this war is, 1, a worse economy. 2, Iran has now been bombing their neighboring countries, a lot of which are our allies. So now they're mad at us, right? 3, the world is mad at us because the strait is closed, which stops, oil tankers from going through, which hurts other countries' economies, right? Now we have angered Iran so much more, right? We've just made it worse, in my opinion, right? And that's what I see on the news every day is we have made it worse. We have made it worse for the American people, most of which are who are fed up. You know, the polls are showing that a lot of Americans, more than like majority of Americans, think that this war was not a good idea, right? And they're seeing it on their day-to-day life, right? They're going and they're trying to get oil, and it's $120-something, right? Like that's what.
I feel that. I filled up my car the other day. It takes premium gas. It's about like $110.
Right. Like yes, it is great that we're trying to stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons, but in my opinion, it has made it worse. That is what I have seen as the outcome of this war, and I don't see a good exit strategy right now. You know, Iran is being difficult. I think Trump is being difficult when trying to find this ceasefire, trying to find this peace deal. You know, and I think on both sides, it's just not a good situation. And if we never entered it in the first place, then I think it would have been better.
Yeah. I think had we not intervened, as you suggest, say we don't intervene at all. We know that this is happening. We choose not to intervene, as we say, okay, if we intervene, maybe it's going to make the price of gas go up a lot. It's going to make the price of oil per barrel go up a lot, be over $88 a barrel, which is the ideal happy medium. Mm-hmm. Say we don't intervene, and a month later, thermonuclear warhead explodes in Tel Aviv, or boom, Rome gets wiped off the map. Are we not equally as culpable for having not acted?
I think that would have. I don't think that would have happened. I don't think they are as close as you say they are, and I don't think. You know, I don't know what would have happened, but we can't go to war based on a what if like that. If our precedent right now, if what we've set is that we can go to war on an uncertain thing, then I think that's wrong.
I agree that we need more pressing data and analytics to go to war than simply a what if scenario. However, we have not only evidence, we've engaged with Iran numbers of times since the 1970s in terms of them attempting to get nuclear weapons. Operation Praying Mantis in 1988, we destroyed half of the Iranian Navy because they attacked a United States ship after we blew up their uranium enrichment facility because they were close to getting a nuclear weapon. We, alongside the Israelis, have been long time keeping Iran in check in terms of whether or not they can acquire nuclear weapons, because we are absolutely certain, given their geopolitical stance and their allies with state terror, with the state of Russia and the Soviet Union for a while, we can be absolutely sure that they, if given the chance, would commit these absolutely atrocious, heinous acts, like launching a thermonuclear warhead at Western nations. And while it is a little wishy-washy as to whether or not it's legal or if we have the precedent to intervene, I think ultimately it really falls into a scenario in which we need to determine whether or not our action or inaction is going to cause a greater immediate consequence. And while I certainly agree that it's to some extent detrimental to the American people in terms of our involvement in foreign wars or foreign military interventions, I do think it is to the betterment of the greater global culture and society that tremendous threats such as these be dealt with appropriately. And I do think that, granted, some of the leadership is on both sides could be improved. Mm-hmm. I do think that were we to come to a civil resolution in terms of the future for the state of Iran, whether that's a new leader, a new form of government, temporary foreign oversight, I do think that would tremendously benefit the Iranian people. The Iranian people were in a state of revolt for a while even before we intervened. They were rebelling against their government because the Iranian people want liberty. They want freedom. They want the values that the United States and its constitution stand for. Many were on the streets of Tehran and other Iranian cities waving not only Persian flags, but American flags, because they believe in the founding ideas of our nation. They believe in the ideas of freedom, liberty, and justice for all. And fundamentally, I think that's tremendous in terms of the necessity for us to take intervention means.
Thank you so much for listening, everybody.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to Jacob.